Hello and welcome, Housewives of True Crime. Oh my goodness gracious, you guys. Happy Monday. Seriously, I cannot believe that we're already into fall. And it's my son, Colton, my youngest's birthday. So I'm going to give him a big ol' shout out. Happy birthday to Colty. He hates when I call him that, so maybe I shouldn't anymore. But I love that. Like, come on, I'm a mom. So, anyways, Colton Kane, happy 12th birthday to you. He does not listen to this podcast, so I'm just putting it in the universe, I guess. But maybe you can wish him a happy birthday on my social media. Tab the housewife, or Housewives of True Crime, or on our Facebook group. We do have a Facebook group that's just private, so no one knows what you're talking about. You can post anything you want, and only the people in the group know, and that's called Housewives of True Crime group in Facebook. You can find it, and I will add you to the group. It's a fun little place to chat, and there's no judgment. And no judgment from anybody else that you're Facebook friends with, which is awesome. Okay, so anyways, you can give Colton a little shout out there if you would like. But okay, this week, you guys, I went to see Madison McGee from Ice Cold Case, and she also does another podcast called LA Crimes. Oh, excuse me. She also does another case called LA Crimes by the LA Times. And so I flew out to LA to do her podcast, and I talk about the case that I'm going to do today for you guys. And I'm going to give a little disclaimer, but it is about people under the age of 18. They are all teenagers, but I do not like to talk about children. And so I just really have to tell you that if it bothers you that this is about people that are under the age of 18, then, and it's a pretty brutal crime. It happened in Austin. There's a documentary on it right now called Yogurt Shop Murders. So if you already kind of know about it, maybe you won't, be too disturbed. So I want to preface that before we even get into the case. But before we get into the case, I flew to LA, and the last few times that I've been flying, I'm not even kidding you, I sit next to somebody that has this like snort, and I like one guy next to me. I mean, it's so disgusting. It's like sucking in mucus, I guess is all I can say. But for 2.5 hours, I had this guy snorting, snorting. I don't know what you want to call it. It was so disgusting. And then coming back, the same thing, but this time a woman. And I'm like, seriously? Like, what is going on? And it happened to me on a flight from Florida. So, I don't know. Etiquette on the plane. Like, don't snort. It's so gross. Also, I made a huge mistake yesterday that I cannot believe I did. I am so cautious when I think people are pregnant to not say anything unless I am fully for sure. But I get really excited when people are pregnant because I'm like, oh, you're having a baby, and I just love babies. And so I get excited for people. And I went to this doctor for the very first time. And I mean, you guys, like, I was for sure that she was having a little baby, and I was so excited for her. And so I just said it. I was like, oh, you're having a baby. And she was like, no, I'm not. Oh my God. I actually never have done that before, where I was wrong, because I am so cautious about it. I was mortified. I was like, I just wanted to crawl under my chair and be like, thank you, but I don't need to see you anymore. I didn't know what to do. It was so bad, and I feel so bad. I literally, I think I look like a deer in the headlights. Like I was like, oh, okay, eeks. So that was a huge mistake on my part, and I don't know what to do about it. I don't think there's anything to do about it, but I'll just move on. Also, I am moving on to homecoming this week for my daughter, and that is different this year because she's not in Texas anymore. And so there are no mums. And if you guys remember me talking about last year, she went to homecoming and the boys in Texas, and I think it's just a Texas thing, they give these thing called mums, which is a flower, but it's not a flower. It's actually this giant ribbon bouquet that they wear around their neck. It's really odd, in my opinion, but Texans love it. And the boys get one that goes on their arm, and it's a thing. And coming from California, it was a weird thing for me at first. And my daughter, also coming from California, I was like, isn't this odd? But she's been here since she was 10. So no, it's not odd to her. And now she doesn't get one being in Florida, and she is like sad about it. So poor little girl does not get a mom this year. And I'm flying in barely. So I am actually going to get dresses for her from a store and shipping them to her. It's such a strange experience not having her with me and doing all these things. It's super odd. And if you are judgmental against me, I totally understand, because I could never in my right mind ever think that I was going to send my child to a boarding school in my life. I thought that that was something that never ever, I actually judged people that did it. And so now that I'm on the other end of the spectrum, I can see how people are like, I can't believe you actually let your daughter live in another state than you. But for her situation, it is working out, and that is what she wanted. And so this is where we are. So it puts my life in a little bit of a panic mode most of the days, but I'm getting through it. So anyways, that's my life for the week. And I'm actually headed to Austin next week, where this episode comes from. So let's get into it. All right, Austin, Texas. If you have not been there, it is the capital of Texas, and it's located in the middle of the state. It's about 3 hours from where I am with no traffic. And it's an awesome city. I actually almost moved there. It's the music capital of the world, besides Nashville, but it is live music, hustle bustle. My brother lives there. It is so fun, great restaurants. If you ever want to go take a trip to Austin or to Texas, I think Austin is a great place to visit. Also very, very beautiful. There's hiking, biking, swimming, boating, tons of fun things. The population right now is just under 1 million people, and it's considered one of the best cities for young professionals in America. It's a college town, so there's a lot of fun, young, active people there. The cost of living is a little higher than the national average, but you could still find places that are affordable in and around Austin. And back in 1991, so I'm taking you pretty far back, the population was just about half as much as it was today. Not really a small town, like 500,000 people, but it didn't have the hustle bustle that it does nowadays. Kids were still walking around, riding their bikes, living, in a big city, but a bigger little city, if you know what I mean. And you all know, because we've done many, many of these crimes, it doesn't matter if you live in a big city or a small city. Crime happens, unfortunately. And on December 6, 1991, just before midnight, an officer on a routine patrol spotted smoke coming from, I can't believe it's a yogurt shop. This was on West Anderson Lane, and he called for the fire department to respond, right? I guess it wasn't really unusual at that time for little businesses that had, like little restaurants to have a fire in it. So that's what he was thinking, although, the yogurt shop didn't really have they didn't have any ovens or anything to start a fire, but he didn't know that at the time. So he calls in for the fire department. They didn't know if anyone was inside, but quickly knocked the 2-alarm fire down in the storage area of this small restaurant. The inside of the storeroom was blackened with smoke, and the room was still really hot, so the firefighters had to stay really low to the ground when they went inside. The lieutenant realized that there was a body, and one of the firefighters saw a second body. Under this collapsed ceiling tiles, they found a third body in the back of the building. It took a moment to realize that these bodies were all female and they were all nude, and they had all been shot. So immediately they call for the police to respond. This wasn't just a simple fire like they thought. This was a horrific murder scene. The bodies were burned beyond recognition and kind of piled on top of one another. Clearly, the fire was set to cover up whatever the killer's tracks, traces, whatever they thought that they could find. They thought, hey, let's burn it down, and the evidence is gone. Detectives were en route when the firefighters actually found a fourth body located about 10 feet away from the other three. The call was updated to the police at the fourth victim, and the firefighters retreated from the building because they need to have the police take over because it's an active crime scene, right? So they're like, we need to get out of here. The fire's out. Now it's up to the police to get evidence and whatnot. So if you also follow true crime enough, you have already heard that an investigator's worst nightmare is fire on a crime scene. Not just because the destruction made by the fire itself, but also because the firefighters are not trying to preserve any evidence. They're just trying to save lives and protect property. They had no way of knowing that there was a murder scene inside of that shop, until after the fire was put out. And because you have to use water, crucial evidence is often washed away. Plus the smoke, the soot, everything in between, people walking, dragging hoses, you name it, that crime scene has already been contaminated. So by the time the detectives arrived, they faced 4 inches of water on the ground, and lots of evidence, I'm sure, has been erased. There was 16 firefighters in boots moving through the scene while the fire was being put out. The first detective on the scene, his name was John Jones, and he would actually lead this investigation. Detective Jones and other detectives searched the scene. The 3 bodies that firefighters had initially discovered in the back of the restaurant were severely burned. The 4th body did not suffer as much damage. All 4 were females and appeared to be teenagers. The bodies were naked and they were bound with their own clothing. And the initial thought was, well, they were probably sexually assaulted. 3 of the girls were lying face down and were piled on top of each other, with the 4th just short distance away. She was face up with one arm slightly outstretched. It was clear that the 4th girl had been shot. Detective Jones requested assistance from the Texas Department of Public Safety to assist in discovering and processing of whatever evidence of sexual assault happened. Also, a shell from a .380 caliber gun was recovered at the scene. The 4 victims were swabbed at the scene and taken to the coroner's office. Usually that would happen outside of the place that they would do that at the coroner's office, the swabs, but they thought since there was already so much destruction, let's not move anything more than we have to, and let's do it right here. So the yogurt shop manager, her name was Maurice Pierce. She was 24 years old. She was called to identify these victims, which I think is far too tragic for a 25 or 24-year-old, in my opinion. But they called her, and when she got there, the fire had burned the victims beyond recognition. She knew who was scheduled that night to close, so, that's all she could really say. It's probably Eliza Thomas and Jennifer Harbison. They were both 17 years old, and they were closing the yogurt shop that night. She also knew that Eliza and Jennifer often had their younger sisters and friends come to just help close up the shop. So police immediately notified Eliza's dad and younger sister, Sonora, who, by the grace of God, you guys, stayed home that night. She was actually going to go to the yogurt shop, but she couldn't get a hold of her dad to ask her, so she didn't go. Police went to the Harbison's house next, and they knocked on the door and asked their mother, Barbara, if she knew where Jennifer and her sister Sarah were. Well, she says they're upstairs sleeping. You guys, you have to remember, there are no cell phones at this time. This is 1991. You just expect your kids to come home when the streetlights come on. I was 11 at the time. That's what my parents would think. And if my mom got home late and my door was closed upstairs, I'm sure she would have thought I was sleeping too. So Barbara says, I'm sure they're sleeping upstairs. And unfortunately, Barbara's assumption was wrong, because when she went to check, she sees that they're not there. And Sarah was supposed to have her friend sleep over that night, 13-year-old Amy Ayers. Barbara told the officers that she believed that Sarah and Amy were in Sarah's room and Jennifer was in her own room, but obviously that was not the case. Police then went to Amy's house next to see if she was there, and of course she was not. So her parents were added to the list of families who would receive the worst news in their entire lives. The families provided dental records for the coroner to use to verify that the four girls were Eliza, 17, Jennifer, 17, Sarah, 15, and Amy, only 13 years old. Swabs gathered by the Texas Department of Public Safety indicated that at least 3 of the girls had been sexually assaulted: Amy, Sarah, and Jennifer. Eliza's swabs were negative, but like we said, it's hard to tell at this point. So we don't know, but that's what it came back with. And since in 1991, DNA was still in its infancy and only could determine if it was, a male or a female at this point. And of course, it was male DNA. So with help from people like the shop manager and family members, investigators started to piece together what they believe happened that night. Jennifer Harbison and Eliza Thomas both were working at the yogurt shop, and the other 2 girls, 15-year-old Sarah and 13-year-old Amy, they were friends and had been at the North Cross Mall that evening. They then walked to the yogurt shop to help Jennifer and Eliza close up for the night, and the plan was for Jennifer to drive them to the Harbison's house for a sleepover after they finished, their yogurt shop shift. Eliza called her younger sister Sonora earlier that evening to see if she wanted to come, but like I said the dad wasn't there, so she didn't go. Detectives believe that the girls were in the process of cleaning when an unknown intruder entered the shop with the intent to rob the place. The shop closed at 11, and the patrol car saw smoke around 11:47. So their murders happened sometime in that window. There were no cameras, but investigators speculated that the girls were led to the back of the building in the storeroom and made to undress. The front door was locked. It was also locked when investigators came, but the back door was unlocked, and $540 was missing from the cash register, making it seem like the motive was robbery. But they were also sexually assaulted, so maybe it was both. Amy's body was located by itself 10 feet away, like I said, and it seemed like she had tried to crawl to escape. Her body also was the one that was most recognizable because I think the fire didn't get to her as much. Their autopsies would reveal that each of them was shot with a .22 caliber weapon, but Amy was also shot with a .380. She also was strangled, unfortunately. The killer or the killers, and it seems like killers since we have 2 guns now, grabbed whatever flammable materials that they could find around the girls, like paper cups, napkins, cardboard, whatever, and that's what they used to set the fire. No accelerants were used. They just kind of used whatever they could find in the storeroom. The fire was set after the girls were killed, and most likely an attempt to cover up these murders. There were 12 other stores in the strip mall at the time, and some had actually been robbed repeatedly in the months prior to this murder. The manager of a clothing store next door to the yogurt shop said her store had been broken in 8 times in 2 months leading up to this murder. So they actually installed bars on their windows for protection, which is very alarming, you guys, especially when you have young girls working at this yogurt shop. And we'll get to that later, but this will play into the fact that the family sued. And I don't blame them, because this is very concerning. If you are having a lot of break-ins and you are not protecting your employees, then that's a problem. Okay, so Jennifer and Eliza often had friends help them close, and it wasn't company policy, but maybe this is where the company was like, well, we're having all these break-ins. It's probably better to have more people on, on the lookout or whatever than just 1 or 2 girls in the shop. The president of I Can't Believe It's Not Yogurt chain flew out to Austin and met with the families of the 4 victims. The company put up a $25,000 reward for any information leading to the arrest and conviction of the killers. A group of entrepreneurs added another $100,000 to the reward, bringing it to a total of $125,000, which is a lot of money today, but way a lot of money in 1991. People wore white ribbons to honor the 4 girls, and they could be seen all over Austin on the trees. This case still haunts Texas today. If you talk to anybody that grew up in Texas, I just met a girl last night and I was talking to her about this case, and oh my gosh, you guys, I went to Bingo Loco. I didn't even tell you that. I don't know if Bingo Loco is just a thing in Texas, but if it is in your area, bring your girlfriends, go to Bingo Loco. It's like a $35 ticket. It's so worth it. It's so fun. It is so fun. You have to do it. It is wild beyond, like, you've never been to a bingo like this, I promise you. But anyways, I met a girl and she's from Texas, and I asked her about this case and she was like, yes, everybody knows about it. Okay, now I digress back to the case. The investigation was continuing and police pulled all the cash register receipts. Every transaction was recorded on like a tape, like those old school receipts, kind of like the ones you get from CVS still, but you know what I'm talking about. So anyways, they pull all those customers and they could see the last customer checked out at 11:03. Anyone who used a credit card was contacted by the police, and they also asked anyone that came and paid cash to please come forward, provide anything that you saw that night, anything. They didn't care. They were like, please come and tell us what you saw in that yogurt shop that night. And so a couple came forward and told the detectives about what they saw the evening at the yogurt shop. They were there at about 10:45 at night, and they saw 2 men at a table near them that were kind of hunched over, talking really quietly, almost whispering. And there was like a bag or something in between the table. They thought it was odd because they also were not eating ice cream. Another patron said they also noticed the pair and that they were probably teenagers and referred to them as boys. They were described as being between 5'4" and 5'7", which I don't think you can really tell sitting down. And I would say also 5'4" and 5'7" is pretty short for teenage boys. I would have to say they're probably taller than that. They said one was thin and one was not, and they were both wearing puffy jackets or vests, and one had like a dark green kind of army colored one, and boots and jeans. Another witness said that there was a Latino man in a light colored car outside the yogurt shop. They said he was just sitting there, which stood out to them because they were like, why is this guy just like, watching the yogurt shop? I don't know. Police came up with a composite sketch for the man in the car as a person of interest. Unfortunately, the police did not come up with a composite sketch of the two men sitting in the booth. So over the following week, the investigation continued and Austin PD opened up a tip line. But their biggest lead would come about 8 days later when a 16-year-old guy named Maurice Pierce was at the mall with a friend. The friend's name is Forrest Welborn. He was 15. Well, Maurice pulls his shirt up like, I want to say like a douche canoe, okay, to show off his gun that he had concealed under his shirt. Well, someone saw this and went and found a security guard who then found Maurice and took the gun from him. It was a loaded .22 revolver, the same caliber as the gun used to shoot these girls. Now, a .22, if you know anything about guns, is a very, very typical gun. So I wouldn't put much into this. And also, you guys, we're in Texas, okay? So this guy pulls up his shirt. He's got this .22. He gets, obviously they're like, what the hell, dude? Like, you're coming into this place. You're not allowed to do that. And immediately he's detained and taken to the juvenile detention center and interrogated by police. And this one investigator, his name is Hector Polanco, starts interrogating him at about 11 o'clock. Maurice tells police that on the night of the murders, he was with Forrest and two other buddies, another guy named Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott. Maurice went on, after hours, to confess that they were the ones at the yogurt shop. He said, well, Forrest used the gun to commit the murders and lit the yogurt shop on fire, but he was just the driver. He wasn't even in the shop. He didn't participate in the murders at all. So when police pulled Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen in for questioning, they said that they had been with Maurice and Forrest that night, but they had been at the mall and saw a fire truck, in the shopping center, but they weren't there. They said that they went to a car lot where Maurice then stole a car and they went on a joyride in San Antonio. That's it. The gun that was sent to the crime lab for ballistic testing, this one gun that Maurice had, were unable to match it to the bullets that were recovered from the girls. Now, maybe it was because the bullets had too much damage, but maybe because it wasn't the same gun. I also will just say it right here because it kind of I think about it. Usually when people use a gun to commit murder, they don't walk around with that gun any longer or 8 days later or show it off to people. Usually that gun is in the trash, in the river, somewhere that people can't really find it. But they sent this gun off for testing. The police then decide to put a wire on Maurice and have him try to elicit a confession from Forrest. He didn't say a thing about it. Both of them were administered polygraph tests, which they both passed that they weren't the guy. The ballistics tests were also, just like I said, inconclusive, plus the DNA recovered from the victims being incomplete. They were unable to test it against the boy's DNA at this point, it was just like that it was a male DNA. So this all was just kind of a dead end at this point. They did not think, I wouldn't say they didn't think that it was them. They just were like, it doesn't seem like Maurice's story is adding up. None of these other guys seem to have any idea about this murder. And the polygraph tests passed out. So they just put Maurice on the back burner. However, in the fall of 1992, 6 months after the murders, Austin PD got a tip within the department itself regarding this Latino man who had been sitting outside the yogurt shop in the car. The sex crimes unit had a sketch that really, you guys, closely resembled this composite made of the man at the yogurt shop. The difference was that the sex crimes unit knew the guy's name. His name was Alberto Cortez. He was a suspect in an aggravated sexual assault case that they were working. Alberto had been arrested in Mexico and under interrogation had actually confessed to the murders of these 4 girls in Austin. However, there were 2 problems with this confession. Alberto said that he used the .38 caliber gun and that he had poured gasoline around the crime scene before he set it on fire. Well, police knew that there were 2 guns, a .22 and a .380, and that no accelerant had been poured to start the fire. So 2 days later, Alberto said that he had just been tortured by the Mexican government and coerced into confessing. So again, another dead end. And by the end of the year, 12 months after the murders, they were no closer to finding what happened or locating a suspect than they had been the day after it happened. Giant billboards went up around town, pictures of the girls were everywhere, numbers for the tip lines, and then another year went by, and another, and another, and another. And every year, the newspaper would print something about the case, but it never was anything new. Police were not getting any closer to solving the case until August of 1999. 7.5 years after the murders, there was a little bit of forward momentum in this case when the FBI released a criminal profile on the killers. They believed them to be young, disorganized, and said that they would have left town after the murders. That brought police back to the 4 young men that they had investigated in 1992. Maurice Pierce, who was young and disorganized, Forrest Welborn, Robert Springsteen, and Mike Scott, who all went to San Antonio together after these murders in a stolen car. Does look like a red flag. The 4 men had all moved on with their lives by this point. This is 7.5 years later, you guys. Maurice Pierce was working in a warehouse. He was married and had a 7-year-old daughter. Michael Scott was also married and working as a repairman. Robert Springsteen had moved to West Virginia. He got married and was managing a McDonald's. And Forrest Welborn was a small business owner who had opened a car repair shop. So they all were like standard dudes. They were not like murdering rapists out there. You know, you would have thought if they were all doing this that maybe they would have like at least some sort of record. I think maybe one of them had a DUI or something, but they were not career criminals. At the time, 7.5 years later, or 7.5 years before, I will tell you, they were like pot smoking teenagers. But now we're, a little bit older, we're in our 20s and we're married. And me, when I say we, I'm talking about them, not me. I didn't get married until my late 20s and I didn't have kids till I was about 30. But anyhow. Okay, so they bring these guys back. Maurice Pierce and Forrest Welborn told the Austin PD the same thing that they did in 1992, essentially nothing new. But Michael Scott's interview was different. They didn't just question him and release him. They brought him back over and over and over again for the course of 5 days, where they spent about 22 hours in the interrogation room being relentless with him, peppering him with questions. And Michael Scott, well, he eventually confessed. But it was after hours of police in his face and handing him information. And when I say handing him information, you guys, like he is being fed information. He is being asked so he says he was at the Rocky Horror Picture Show that night. And the thing about police interrogation is they can lie to you. And so they're like, there wasn't the Rocky Horror Picture Show that night. And so in Michael Scott's head, he's thinking like, holy shit, really? Like, he doesn't know that they're lying to him. And so he's thinking at the time, well, I could have swore I was there, but maybe I wasn't there. If you're telling me that it wasn't actually showing at the time, then I guess it wasn't showing. So I wasn't there. And after hours and hours of them asking him questions, but then saying, like, okay, so you were at the murder and you murdered these girls and you had, Maurice's gun and you did this. He finally, talked himself into the fact that he must have been there, which is something that I just like. It's like reminds me of the Brandon Dassey case where we need to get to the bottom of things for sure, right? We want a confession. That's the best case scenario. But we don't want a false confession. A false confession leads us nowhere. It leads us to complete destruction of somebody's life for the purpose of a win from a policeman. I don't think so. Like that actually, somebody asked me recently what my pet peeve is, and I will say that is definitely one of them. That and like the fact that, prosecutors that go after people that are actually innocent and just for the win. I'm sorry, like unless you have enough evidence, we're not going to paint somebody's picture just because you need a win under your belt. Doesn't fit with my narrative, okay? So anyways, the police interrogate this guy to no end, and they get him to say whatever they want him to say. The detective at this point was not Detective Jones. He literally takes his gun used in the homicide and holds it to Michael Scott's head at one point during the interview. That's how crazy this is. The Austin police then bring Robert Springsteen back in and use Michael Scott's confession against him, and he eventually confesses. Same sort of thing. And although these guys, they're standard dudes, I don't think they're like the sharpest tool in the shed also. So, take that with a grain of salt. But I think that if you're broken down enough, you can probably get a lot of people to confess to things that they just never thought. We can all sit there and say, like, why would you confess? I would never confess. But psychological things can happen and make people do things that they think that they could never, ever do. So they have 2 confessions now signed, and they were enough for arrest. And they arrested all 4 of these guys and charged them with the murders of Jennifer, Sarah, Eliza, and Amy. However, Forrest Welborn never confesses. He kept telling the detectives that he has no idea what they were talking about. Maurice Pierce was also questioned, but he did not give a confession like Michael Scott or Robert Springsteen. So despite years of digging, police were unable to find any evidence connecting Maurice or Forrest to this crime. So their charges were dismissed, leaving only Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen to face trial. And by the way, they don't have any evidence against these guys either. They just have their confession. And at this point, I guess that's enough. So the 2 were charged with capital murder and faced the death penalty. The same judge, the Honorable Mike Lynch, presided over both trials where the defendants' confessions were used as the main evidence against them. In April 2001, Robert Springsteen went on trial. He had recanted his confession. He said that it had been coerced by the Austin police detectives. His lawyers attempted to have his confession ruled inadmissible, but Judge Lynch ruled that it could be used. And once the jury heard this confession, the case was pretty much over. It's really hard to think that somebody would just confess. Also, they don't show the 20 plus hours, 5 days that this guy is saying, I didn't do it. I don't know what you're talking about. I was at the Rocky Horror Picture Show. They don't show that part, right? They just show a seamless confession in the videos that they're playing for the jury. So after they heard that confession, I said, it's pretty much over. He was found guilty and sentenced to death for these murders. Then in September 2002, Michael Scott's trial began with the same Judge Lynch presiding. Just like in Robert Springsteen's case, Michael recanted his confession and said that he had been coerced into admitting to these murders. The detectives had used what is called the Reed technique to elicit the confession from Michael. This technique can be manipulative on people with developing brain or having some sort of vulnerability. It's been criticized over and over that it can lead innocent people into falsely confessing, which it does, and you will find it did in this case. So despite the controversy, the technique is not illegal and it is still used today. This technique, it begins with the police telling them the subject they know that the person was guilty of the crime. Like, we already know that you are guilty. We already have evidence against you. And with this intense psychological pressure and manipulation, they eventually get them to confess. So in Michael Scott's case, over the course of 5 days, they asked him all these questions, and he wrote the confession, or they wrote the confession for him, and Michael actually signed it. So the trial proceeded with his confession as the main evidence, and after all the evidence was presented, the jury deliberated for about 22 and a half hours, and it was actually about the same amount of time for both trials. The jury found him guilty of murder and he was sentenced to life in prison. So they spared him the death penalty, but he still did get life. So since Robert Springsteen was sentenced to the death penalty, his case was automatically appealed, and Michael Scott's attorney filed an appeal as well. Both legal teams cited that Sixth Amendment rights had been violated because each other's confessions were allowed as evidence in both cases, but they were not allowed to question the other accuser, which is the Sixth Amendment. So the Supreme Court ruled in 2004 that statements made to the police by co-defendants during the questioning were unreliable. Generally speaking, each defendant would try to place more guilt on the other. It makes their confessions inadmissible in court. So both of the verdicts were thrown out, and the district attorney was ordered to retry their cases without the confessions. The two men stayed in jail for 3.5 years, while the prosecutors filed motions on what evidence could be used. But then in March of 2008, there was a huge break in the case. The partial DNA recovered from the vaginal swabs taken from the girls in 1991 was retested using updated methods that had been developed since then, and one of the sample returned a full DNA profile. Michael Scott, Robert Springsteen, Forrest Welborn, and Maurice Pierce's DNA were compared to this profile and were not found to be a match. The police thought that they were finally going to close the book on this long overdue case, but instead, they were like, what? They don't have the DNA. Must have been a fifth guy. Like, what? There is no fifth guy. No one ever talked about a fifth guy. So, but they have a DNA profile of somebody else. And so they had to let these guys out of prison. The DNA profile was submitted to CODIS, but they were unable to locate a match there too. So these guys were let out of prison. Thank the heavens, you guys, because I'm telling you, with this DNA evidence, we can find who did this. Even today, I mean, they need to take that DNA and they need to do a little bit more with it, in my opinion. But these guys were let out, and unfortunately, this case is still unsolved. But I want to look at those two guys that were in the booth. Unfortunately, they did not do a composite sketch at the time. And so if we go back and talk to the people that were there that night, it's probably even if they're still alive, or, who knows who was in that yogurt shop that night that saw these guys, but they are out there. And if we can get a composite sketch of them and do a little bit more research on this DNA, it would be amazing. I will tell you that a tragic thing happened to Maurice. An officer actually pulled Maurice over for a traffic stop, and Maurice
probably had PTSD from what had happened to him when he was a kid. He tried to get away and they tased him. In the struggle, Maurice actually took out a knife and cut the officer with it, and Officer Wilson then drew his weapon and shot Maurice Pierce. He then ran off but was found deceased close to where the altercation took place. So he is no longer with us. Officer Wilson was taken to the hospital where he was treated and with a severed artery, which is awful. He was cleared of any wrongdoing, and the shooting was determined to be done in self-defense. Maurice Pierce did have a pretty high blood alcohol content level that night, well above the legal limit. So it's speculation, but it would be an easy assumption that Maurice was pretty leery of the Austin Police Department, and that's why he, went kind of berserk. Also, the fact that he was drunk, but we will never know. Robert Springsteen sued for wrongful incarceration, but was denied because they didn't exonerate these guys. They still, I don't know, somehow think that there is a fifth suspect that could have been the DNA, which I would say is not accurate. Now, I just want to talk a little bit about the girls. Eliza Thomas was born May 16th, 1974 in Austin to her parents, Maria and James Thomas. 4 years later, her baby sister, Sonora, was born, who is on the documentary. She is lovely. After Eliza transferred to Lanier High School her sophomore year, she joined FFA, Future Farmers of America, if you don't know what that is, and that's where she met the Harbison sisters. She loved animals and dreamed of becoming a veterinarian one day. Her sister Sonora said that she always had small animals. She was always taking care of animals. She loved makeup and clothes, but also loved fixing up cars. True disco biscuit. I mean, she was going to be something. She was also involved in the agricultural mechanics program in high school, where she excelled in welding and small engine repair. I mean, this girl is like a badass. Then Jennifer Ann Harbison was born May 9th, 1974 to parents Bob and Barbara Harbison, which is so cute. Barb and Bob, I mean, cute. She was known for being outgoing, opinionated, and driven. She was the president of Lanier High School's chapter of FFA, and she was a member of the varsity track team, ran the 400 and the 1600 relay. Go, girlfriend. She took a job at the yogurt shop to help make payments on her Chevy S10 pickup. Her dad bought it for her on the condition that she helped pay for it, and she drove her little sister around, and that's, I mean, this family lost both of their girls, so, I mean, one day you'll see them in heaven. Sarah Louise Harbison was the sister born on October 28th, 1976, and police called her the leader and someone who was going to leave a mark on the high school. Sarah was described as warm-hearted, very spirited, with the maturity beyond 15 years old. She played volleyball and basketball in middle school and participated also in the FFA like her sister. And then her best friend, Amy Lee Ayers, was born January 31st, 1978 to her parents, Bob and Pam Ayers, and joined a big brother named Sean. She loved country music and thought that George Strait was really cute. He was back in his day, man. And I mean, George Strait could sing to me all day long. I love him so much. Amy loved all animals and was proud of raising a sheep named Tootie in FFA. She was an 8th grader at Burnett Middle School and remembered as having a real magnetic personality. She was known to be funny, kind, and a little bit of a prankster. Amy had dreams of also becoming a veterinarian and showing horses. Amy's brother Sean and his wife Angie are victim advocates who serve as the advisory committee for the Attorney General of Texas Cold Case and Missing Persons Unit, which is really amazing. The yogurt shop murders remain unsolved to this day, 34 years later. So if anyone has information, please contact the Austin PD homicide tip line. It's 512-477-3588 or at Crime Stoppers at 512-472-TIPS, which is 512-472-8477. You guys, I want to know who's in that booth. I want to know who those two guys are. 2 guns, 2 guys sitting in the booth, one with an army style jacket. Who are you? Who were they? This is in 1991. I know it was a long time ago, but Austin was still small. I still think we can find out who did this. So let's hope and pray. All right, that's it for today. If you want more of me, I am here every Thursday on Patreon. It's also a good way to listen ad-free. Although you guys, Revolve is one of the sponsors and that's my very favorite place to shop. So if you still like the ads, then great, because Revolve is awesome. And I think my code is Clink. So if you go to Revolve, check out with the code Clink, you get, I want to say, you get like 15% off. So it's awesome and you got to use it. But anyways, let's also talk about 5 crimes. If you need hair serum, if you need your hair to grow, who doesn't? It's the best. I get so many great reviews on that one. That is definitely the favorite of all products that we have. My favorite is the body scrub. It's Smooth Criminal. It's called, let me see. It's behind me. This is it. If you're watching on YouTube, it is so delicious. I use this in my shower every single day. It smells delicious, so it makes your skin smell good, but it is so soft and yummy, and you get out of the shower and you're like, I don't even need lotion. It's so good. Oh, the Patreon. It's also called the Clink Clink Club on Apple, so you can just hit subscribe on the Clink Clink Club. On Spotify, it's called Housewives of True Crime bonus content. And then if you want to do Patreon, it's patreon.com/Housewives of True Crime. It's $5 a month and you get ad-free and you get the episodes a little bit early and you get another episode on Thursdays. And it's a really good way to support this podcast. And I really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for listening. Thanks for hanging in there with me. If you haven't given me a 5-star review, I would beg you to do so. And shoot me a little comment. You can also comment on Spotify, and I read those and I can comment back on Spotify, which is kind of fun. So anyways, that's it. Clink, clink.